What's up, YouTube? It's Joe Catchpolia sitting on the couch, making some money, investing in fractional real estate online, as usual. Actually had a pretty good day today. Picked up some tokens super cheap. Got to average down my basis in quite a few that I own, and so there's some sort of weird selling on the site. Like I can't really get my head around why some of the people are selling some tokens so cheap. Um, I think maybe some of them, they're not getting the yield that they were hoping, and either they don't realize or they've given up on the fact that there's a possibility to sell these assets in the real world. And so, making $0 and seeing your token value go down, maybe some of them just want to cut their losses. I'm not really sure. As I mentioned in other videos, I think that this is what really creates a lot of opportunities for someone like us, right? Someone who's going to go in, try to figure out, um, what that home is really worth, what we might get out of it if we go ahead and, push and get that home sold, just like we're working on with this one here, on this Keeler one. I don't know if you haven't seen my video on that. It's one that, it was one of the first, it's really the second one that I started buying tokens in that we are moving to get sold. It's already under contract at what is going to be a fantastic price if it sells for us. Um, I'm saying us because, there's a bunch of us owners in it. I realize that this is just me making a video. So don't worry, I'm not a crazy person who thinks there's more than one of me here. But there's quite a few others that I'm working on. Uh, but today I want to talk a little bit about, why there is this opportunity, right? Like why are these operating so poorly as investment properties? Why did people get sucked into buying these? This is one that I've only bought 3 tokens in so far. I haven't done, I hadn't done really full due diligence on it yet, but I had done a little bit and I had seen when they were super cheap and I just had a little bit of extra cash piling up from, collecting rents from the few that I do have. So I just went and bought this one. It's not really one I've taken a very deep dive in yet, but I wanted to show you what I think a lot of people missed about this when they bought it initially. Because, as all of these tokens were, this one was originally purchased at $50 per token. Um, there's 3,538 tokens. And so what does that mean? People were paying an implied price of what? 338 times 50, about 176.9. Okay. And I could have just as a reminder, I'd always like to look at it from the tokens for some reason. But, you could always just look into the financials and see, okay, what was the underlying asset price? Oh, that's interesting. This total investment value doesn't equal 50 times that. I wonder what happened. So there's maybe some tokens got, I don't know, that's really weird. Usually it's going to equal this exactly. Did I type something in wrong? Could have. Let's try again. So let's see. 3538 times 50, 176.9. Underlying asset price, total investment value. Something weird going on there, and I'm not really sure what it is because usually, that'll give me my that'll spit out the same number as what they have in there. So I'm glad we did that, right? So the implied price of tokens, 177,000, let's just call it. Um, you know, it looked to be when you would look in on here, it looked to be a reasonable price relative to what the rent is, depending on where you're from, right? They were, I don't know what it was originally rented for, but they were trying to get 1650 the first time it went vacant. I think the first time they actually rented it on here was 1500. It's not a terrible amount of rent for, um, for the price. For if you're spending 177,000 and you're getting 1500 in rent or 1650, especially, you'd be pretty happy with that here in San Antonio. We'd be very happy with that here in San Antonio, but it's because we're a fast-growing market and have landlord-friendly laws and whatnot, and so it's a much different market, and people pay a little bit more relative to the rents here. But really, for compared to a lot of the other Chicago properties that I've bought pieces of so far, that's it's a low rent to price ratio, and so that already puts some pressure on what the yield could be. And actually, let's look at the financials here. What do they have for? Um, yeah, it's not going to be, they're not going to have, obviously. Why can't I see it though? It's bothering me. I don't even have it on here, probably because it's not being calculated, but so you can't see the cap rate. I got to move this now so I can close that. It's a little bit annoying. All right. Um, but it couldn't have been a very high cap rate, for Chicago because it tends to be cheaper. But I'm gonna just sort of dive a little bit into, why. So I've been buying a lot of these properties, and I've been doing it with the assumption that we're eventually going to get them sold. The prices relative to the tokens are still really good, or have become really good in a lot of cases. When you're buying something, this is more than a 60% discount from what it was originally sold for. Um, that's where I think the opportunity is. Was this ever going to make money as a rental? I really don't know. It seems like if you go through here, the big problem is it's a market where tenants just have way more rights than landlords. You can see like in this one, and they said, oh well, this was the property manager's fault. The property was, the tenant was behind. They moved out. There was a pretty expensive repair. Okay, fine. They got that fixed up. Decided, okay, we're going to rent it again, and it took them quite a while to rent it. Finally, did get it rented at $1,500 a month, and it looks like when you follow along, the tenants were requesting some repairs, which is perfectly fine, right? If it's legitimate. But oftentimes it is when they start to do that, it's because they're going to stop paying rent, and they're going to be like, okay, we requested some repairs, you didn't do it, so I'm not paying rent, and then that helps them. Now, is that exactly what happened in this situation? I don't know, but they did go past due, and you can see, with each note, the amount outstanding keeps going up and up and up, and by the time they were finally evicted, they owed, let's see, 16,830 dollars. I think that is where it ended when they finally got them out. Right. So, um, yeah, and then it starts talking about, we had to do a trash out because it was full of, there's a whole bunch of trash in there. But $16,000. It's basically, it's 10 months, 11 months of being in the home, not paying any rent for that long. And as landlords not being able to get them out. And that is really kind of shocking for me being in the Texas market. When I look at that, I'm like, well, how is that even possible? Right. Like it's mind boggling. And so, um, by buying in a market that you have, very strong tenant rights like that, where it's so difficult to evict, what you have to do is buy quality assets that are going to attract the type of tenants, um, that's are much less likely for that to be a problem. And so, who are those people? They're people that are going to care about their credit score. They're going to be people that care about, what other people think of them. They don't want the fact that they got evicted to come up. People that just, have jobs, are responsible, and want to pay the rent. And so the that's more likely to happen when you have, good tenant screening processes, but also really when you're buying the properties, getting, really understanding what the neighborhood's like, what, what, if it's a place with high crime, for example. And so I'm going to give you a couple of, so one of the things I wanted to point out, Lofty always shares with you these two location data points, right? The roof stock rating and the niche rating. And So I wanted to open each of those up and just point something out. So when you look at niche, right? And I know some people say niche if you're fancy, but I say niche because there's riches and niches. There's not reaches and niches, right? Um, anyway, the if you look at what niche is doing, they're actually looking at the full zip code, right? And they're giving it a B minus. So if you just looked at this and said, "Oh, well, they got a B minus," well, that's the whole zip code, right? That's not the neighborhood. And when you're buying a home, you're buying a specific neighborhood, and so that's a big deal. So okay, median home value that seems to match up. Rent versus own. Nope, what did I do? I clicked on something. You've got your rent versus own info and everything. This is all median rent significantly lower than what someone was paying for ours, so that's interesting. But again, I mean, they're looking at your whole zip code. Um, that's not super helpful when I want to find out what's actually going on with my property. And then, so the other one that they give you is this roof stock neighborhood rating. This one, it's not actually clear. Okay, they're like, okay, this is your property, this is your rating. Well, it's not really clear just from looking at this, what exactly my neighborhood is, what they're looking at. But so they give you some info, okay, low median home value, low median income. This percent employed is a little bit deceptive because they're showing, 60% is the bottom end. So, it looks, if you just glance at it, you think, wow, nobody's employed, but it's, 80 is this middle here. So yes, it's high unemployment, but it's not as crazy as it initially looked. Percent owner occupied. Okay. This is again, it's looking like somewhere around 40. That seemed to match up with what we were looking at before. But I'm going to show you one other data point where it doesn't seem to. And then, okay, very, very low rated schools. So this is a much bleaker picture, right? Like 1.5 stars compared to the B minus that we saw on niche. And so, it's important to look at both, really understand what each one are giving you. I think this one is drilling down into the neighborhood a little bit more. Uh, I can't tell you that for sure because it's not telling us, it doesn't tell us that, right? Get 1-star properties. What is that about? Oh, that's funny. So you can search their platform for those. This is just, let's see. The other thing that I wanted to show you that, is I'm always looking at homes.com for the values. But you could also find out a lot about the neighborhood on here as well, and I like this a lot. They'll give you, let me see. It actually, okay, Jeffrey Manor. This is actually like the specific subdivision. Um, it gives you a little bit of a write up about it. Average home value. Okay, now we can see. Whoa, this is way lower than what we were looking at before, right? Average household income. Percent renter says only 27% here, so that's kind of interesting. This is significantly. The other one was showing us 40% owner occupied, which would imply 60% renters. And so that, we've got some conflicting information here. I believe that this is giving us the smallest, neighborhood view, but I'm not positive because again, well, let's see if we say learn more about Jeffrey Manor. What are we going to find out here? Okay, so this is interesting. It's going to give us exactly what we're looking at, and so I like this a lot. Right, we get to understand what's going on, what they're talking about as far as like the neighborhood, and so that's really great, right? And so, okay, average value here is much lower than what we had looked at before, much lower than what they paid, but that average price per square feet, 109. So how many square feet do we have in this property? Let's look and let's do some math on that, right? 1631. Let's multiply that by 109. That's actually looking pretty good for us. 1631 times 109. Look at that, right around what was paid, what they originally paid for this. This has been on the platform for years, right? But so it's possible that this home is really worth what they paid, but it's just not a great investment property because of the dynamic of it's a very difficult to rent, right? It's very difficult to rent properly if you're not vetting tenants well, which often happens if you don't have the best property managers. And, there's just this tendency on Lofty for the people to want to get the cheapest property manager, not necessarily the best. And so, um, well, so this is interesting and it's promising, right? It's okay. And when I was looking at the values, and this is what when I went and purchased this. Let's see, can we scroll down so that you can see that? Yeah, there we go. Um, the so currently, let me go back to this. And I know I'm a little bit all over the place. Sorry about that. I'm going to show you one other thing that I think you don't want to miss because we haven't gone over how to use it before. Just a little crime statistic thing. But I'm going to get to that real quick. I'm just doing an aside here. 3538 times it's like 1780 with fees. Let's call it $20. My basis in this is around $70,000 is what the I've been purchasing these at actually, right? And what's my actual average basis? 1753, and then again add the fees. It gets up to about $20 per token. Um, if I can buy into this and then we eventually sell it, even at the low end of this range, 150, that's a double, right? That's almost a double after fees and everything. It's probably, I mean, it's a huge profit. And now this home, I'm sure, is in rough shape right now because there was the trash out, and there might be, we might end up spending a lot of money to get it ready for sale or, rent ready again, whatever they end up doing. I don't have enough tokens in this one yet to really affect any vote. And so, it's one that I'm just going to slowly pick up tokens as they're cheap. And even if it takes me 2 years to get to the point where people are willing to sell it, if I can make a 40% return in 2 years, that's well worth it, right? And if we ended up getting a tenant in there for a little while in the meantime, that's great too. Uh, and I don't know. That's one of the things I mention a lot is right now this is Lofty is still very much an experiment for me. I've only had one that I've bought and held through the sale so far. I've got the second one going. It strikes me that there's a ton of opportunity because of this very low basis that you can get in here at. I've seen a couple of the others sell, but I hadn't gotten tokens of those yet. So I think that this is really, this is what's attracting me to the site. But again, you want to do your own due diligence and really understand the risks. Because it is, I mean, you could buy those tokens and never get everybody to agree to sell it. And then you're stuck with these cheap tokens and not much rental yield for a long time. But just like always, I looked at Redfin too. It basically says it's worth the same thing that it was bought for on Lofty. Zillow did too. It worried me a little bit because Zillow has this huge rents estimate, right? I mean, the last time we rented it was 16 or 1,500. We couldn't even get the 1,650 they were looking for. I know that was a couple of years ago, but this seems a little bit off, so it makes me worried that maybe that's off too, right? But then you see the pictures that they had up on here. I think this is when it was purchased, and then maybe these were when it was leased, or maybe these were when I'm not really sure. The timing. I wonder if you can. I don't know that you can really figure out. I gotta close that here. When those. Oh wait, was there no date on there? All right, those are just letters and numbers. But I think, and right now it probably looks more like this, right? And so we're either going to have to spend a little money again, or understand that we're going to sell it for 100,000 or 115,000. Like whatever the number is. I mean, there's a big enough discount in the purchase of this that it seems to me that there's a deal here, right? And so that's why I keep buying up these tokens. But I just wanted to explain like why I think all of these really suffer as an investment. I don't think, despite the fact that I think they're priced very well. I don't think most of these will ever become a good investment property, and it's because it's just really tough to be a landlord in this market. I mean, all of the if you look now, I have a lot of these in Chicago, and they're all going through the same issues, right? Let's see, this one's Chicago, this one's duplex in Chicago, duplex in Chicago. Um, this one's that's selling is in Chicago. Other duplex in Chicago. It's a market that I've been picking up quite a few in. Um, and it's one of the reasons is it seems like the prices are really there. Like I said, this one's under contract to sell. Another one I've seen but I wasn't involved in. Looks like it sold for a decent amount relative to the token price. Um, but it doesn't seem like we can operate anything in that market profitably. And one thing to keep in mind, none of these have a mortgage on them, right? Like there's no there's no debt service, and it's difficult to run them profitably because long periods of time of not getting rent, long periods of vacancy, and very expensive turnovers. And when you add those three things together, um, unless you're just an active manager that's like really taking care of it in your own, you know, which is not what's happening with properties on Lofty, especially if there's not a co-owner. Um, you're just it's a recipe for failure. And I don't want to pick on Chicago. There's plenty of other markets that there's a lot of properties. There's a lot of these Memphis ones. I'm picking up some of those. Detroit obviously is a market that's tough. Um, all the Ohio stuff, there's a whole bunch of these that they look great on paper, right? The rents look great compared to the purchase price. But the reason that is because it's not easy to be a landlord there, and there's more risk than say when you're a landlord in San Antonio. I mean, so the company where I work, my day job, we manage 1,500 doors of residential properties. And in the 6 years I've been here, I can think of one eviction that took like a very long time. And it started during COVID, and it went to a jury trial, which was ridiculous. And, I mean, it was an owner that was just extremely legal, savvy in a legal sense, not an owner, a tenant that was extremely savvy in a legal sense and was managed to drag it out for longer than anything I've seen. But for the most part, if an eviction takes 2 months here, it makes me wonder what went wrong. And so to see somebody lived in a home for 10 months without paying, it's just absolutely shocking for me. And so, I think the opportunity for me at least is to pick these up cheaply, get everybody on board with selling it and then sell and make a profit and move on to some of the market, invest in some of the better markets and some of the better properties. Um, but for now, I mean, I think that's where things are. But so one more thing that I like to always look at, well, I always talk about, I looked, did a little walk around the neighborhood. It actually looked pretty nice when I walked around here, like when I did I say walk around, but I'm just using the Google Street View. I didn't see a lot of graffiti. I didn't see, um, there was some like, properties in disrepair, but not a ton. It looks like this at one point in time must have been a super nice neighborhood, right? Like you had these nice big yards, you had, the mention in the description of that neighborhood that these homes were probably mostly bought by people with the GI Bill after World War II, and I think that's probably accurate history. I don't really know. You get a church and you get a school here. I didn't see anything that I thought, oh, this is a huge red flag. So anyway, that would have been a positive thing for me. But I don't think I've talked about this spot crime map at all. This is my favorite map, crime mapping thing. I use this a lot in, looking for properties where I'm going to buy the whole property and I'm planning to hold it for a long-term investment. It's tough to keep tenants in areas with high crime. And, if you look at this, it'll actually tell you, okay, what are the types of crimes that are happening? It'll actually show you, where on the map they happen. And one of the things that I wanted to really point out about this, because I think it is a great resource, but is you have to, any address that you pull up is going to have quite a few little crime spots on it. But what you have to do is look at the time, right? Like look at the dates, because sometimes you'll see this many spots and it will be a whole year of crimes that added up, right? And sometimes you'll look at these and you'll look and you can see, okay, 11/23 to 23. Like this is all let's go all the way to the end. All of these are in the last 2 weeks, basically, right? So like this many crimes were reported just in the last 2 weeks in this area. Um, what are these ones? Let's see. And each one, there's the little keys. Okay, so you had a couple of thefts, you had assaults, you had graffiti, you had a burglary. And you can click on each one of these and see what actually happened and zoom in closer and see, okay, so like we're getting really close to some of our property or to our subject property here when we do this. Um, is that Oglesby right there? I think it is. Like that's, oh yeah, it's right there, right there. Right, obviously, we have the whole thing. And so, okay, we had an assault like right next door, and we had what is that one? That's the theft, and so it is. And these are all recent, right? And so, if I'm going to buy one that I want to operate long term, this sort of thing concerns me a little bit, right? I want to know. Uh, so let's see what happens if we zoom in more, and then we just search this area. Oh, nope, it just did the same spot again. So this is one that I like to use a lot. It is uh but you just always have to open up this crime thing and look at how far back, because like if you had this number of dots, but it's over the course of a year, it's a much different it's a much different area when you have this number of icons, and it's all of these in the last 2 or 3 weeks. And so this is one that I think if I were to be buying these tokens and spending $50, where I'm not getting a big discount relative to the property value, and I'm thinking that I'm going to hold this and it's going to appreciate and I'm going to, collect rents and have good solid tenants that are going to continue to pay and not have any problems. The people that live in an area like this are people that don't really have a choice, right? They're kind of stuck. uh, either their credit isn't good and so they're living where a landlord will accept them, or it's, living in a nicer neighborhood is too expensive. And so as soon as they do have a choice, they'll move somewhere else, right? So if they get a better job, they improve their credit a little bit, all those things. It becomes really difficult to keep tenants long term. And the best way, if you look at all of the expenses that we go through on a property like this, the long vacancy obviously is a problem, but also spending $7,000 every time there's a turnover. It's very tough to make money doing that if you have a turnover every year or two, right? And so, the way to really make some money with a investment property is to have a tenant that's in there for a very long time, that pays, that gives you very few problems, that you do your general repair and maintenance, but you don't have they're not real rough on the property. All of that is what you really need. And it's hard to attract that type of tenant. Oh, let's close this. If you have an area that has a lot of crime going on, and so I think looking at this, looking at the roof stock rating where it's a 1.5 star, that sort of data. I would, when I'm helping clients find properties here in town, it's never a neighborhood that I'm recommending, right? It's not and it's not necessarily even like just looking at those ratings, but when what I get to do here is look at the occupancy data, how long it takes to rent properties, right, on our MLS. And those types of areas typically correspond with each other, right? Like it's really hard um, to keep a property full, to continue to collect rent, to not have large turnovers in certain parts of town. And so that's you just have to keep that in mind when you're looking at properties and when you're doing your due diligence. All the things that you can do. Um, So I don't know, that's one of the tools I like a lot, and I don't think I've mentioned it on here before, but it's because most of the time I'm looking at these and I'm just trying to say, hey, what can we buy this for, and what can we sell it for? Most of these I haven't been looking at through a long term lens because just frankly, there's much there aren't very many opportunities on the marketplace that I think, oh, that's going to be a great deal and it's going to make a lot of sense in the long run. There are some, I've bought some, but in general, I think that it's, uh, you know, I think the real opportunity is in the discounted properties, the distressed properties. And for me, I think it's partially my risk reward profile. Uh, I'm not putting my life savings on here. I'm putting, it's at the moment it is still just experimenting, but it is, I'm trying to, if I'm going to invest in something like this versus, just continuing to buy properties here in town. Um, I want I want the opportunity to get a fantastic return, right? Not an average return. And where I really see that for now is in a lot of the discounted properties, and so that's why that continues to be what I'm buying. Now, there are over 100 properties on here. There are certainly more that I'm going to check out. Um, and there are some that I have bought that I think are going to just provide good cash flow, and I'll be happy with that. Sorry about that. In any case, I just want to share with you, some of those other due diligence tools that I'm using, things that I'm looking at regularly, because it is, um, I think it's how people got in trouble, right? Like I think if you really paid attention to this neighborhood, when this token was at $50, I can't understand why you would buy there, right? Like it doesn't seem like it's a spot that you're going to get great appreciation, right? Because your appreciation is usually happens a place where you have a large amount of owner occupants, and depending on which one of those data points was right, it doesn't seem like that's the case. Um, and it also doesn't look, it looks like it would be a tough area to attract and maintain, tenants that are going to be paying their rent regularly. And yes, they didn't have the foresight of having this history here. But I think, you can look at some of the info, uh, median info, percent employed. I kind of glossed over that number, but the employment number, yes, it was like 70 or 80%. I was pointing out it's not as bad as it looked, but it is still bad, right? Like, I mean, a large number of people unemployed. That means at any given time, a large portion of your tenant pool is going to be out of a job, and that's tough, right? Sorry about that. My screen recorder froze again, but yeah, I was just mentioning, looking at employment data in your neighborhood makes a big difference. Like I just said, if you have a large portion of unemployed renters in your neighborhood, it's you're going to have a lot of turnover, and it can be tougher. And so looking at these things on the front end, is a lot more important than just looking at some projected financials that assume a fully rented property, which is not what you're seeing here now, but what is what was presented, I'm sure, when this property was first listed, right? So, a lot of times people are just looking at the rent, comparing it to the price, and not thinking about this occupancy turnover, non-payment type stuff. And so it leads a lot of investors that aren't doing proper due diligence to buy stuff like that. And, it's something that I'm often trying to recommend against for clients. But at the same time, it's what's created what looks like to be fantastic opportunities for people on this platform right now. Um, what's interesting is I think that you can see that there are people still, um, buying new properties on here. And I think it's gotten a little better. I think that the markets are a little bit better. Because there's co-owners, I think there's a little bit better, product being brought to the site. But there are still some that I think in the future we're going to see like, oh wow, that $50 token again turned into, and maybe we never see $50 tokens drop to 18 pretty regularly. But there's definitely going to be ones that are going to 25, and we're going to have that opportunity. So this is probably the golden year of, value investing on Lofty would be my guess. I think we'll probably have, you know, I don't know that there'll be the same percentage of distressed properties in the future. I don't know that for sure. I mean, it's certainly possible that a lot of the ones that are on there now end up like this, right? But I think that really the first couple batches of properties that came on, and a lot of the markets that we're in, were the types of properties and markets that attract really novice investors, right? Really ones that look at yield and don't really think about much else. I didn't talk at all about the market as a whole before, but it is one that it's not a fantastic overall market. It's not one that I'd typically be targeting. You don't have the fast growth. You don't have strong landlord protections, right? You have the opposite. Strong tenant protections, which makes it really tough to be a landlord. And you just don't have, the constant increase in demand that you're having in some of the markets that are growing faster, like San Antonio or, a lot of the major Texas markets and Florida and there's lots of places throughout the country where I think investors would be much, much better off focusing on if they're just looking at something that I'm going to buy and hold very long term. None of these are that for me, right? I'm buying ones and trying to basically just flip the tokens, right? Buy the token, super cheap price. We get in there, we sell the home. We're not actually flipping the property. We're not doing any repairs. We're not, we're just buying it from the previous investors who have basically just run it into the ground. And I think not through a lot of fault of their own. I think, well, I think they messed up. I don't think they did proper due diligence up front. And I think it wasn't really clear, necessarily, who was running it and how it was run and everything like that. But now that created this opportunity now, and we'll see what happens going forward. In any case, I think that I've rambled way too much. If you're still watching, I really appreciate your patience. I'm sure that hopefully you're getting something out of this. Hopefully this is a cautionary tale, but also, that you're taking advantage of some of the opportunities. Again, just because I am investing in it doesn't mean it's going to make money. Make sure you do your own due diligence. Make sure you're only taking risks that you're comfortable with. And until next time, I'm just going to keep making mistakes.